Hi, and welcome to part 2 of the Tamron 28-75mm lens image review, I guess you can call it. Here we're going to be looking at some images taken with this lens, and we're going to start off with a couple images that were taken with a full frame Nikon D750, which is a full frame FX sensor camera. And in this particular first photograph here, we're set to 48mm. And I did have it set to 5.6 just so I get some little bit more depth of field. And then also one thing I noticed when you're using this lens with a full frame camera, things are very, very sharp in the center as well as on the edge here. I took a close look on the edge of the things that were on the same plane as where I was focusing in the center, and they're very, very sharp. So this lens is really awesome for a full frame camera. And of course, it's not bad for a crop sensor camera either, as we're going to go into shortly. Here again, we have another one taken with the Nikon D750, the full frame camera. Again, I'm at 5.6. Now here I'm shooting at a 30th of a second handheld. And I do want to mention the only thing, this lens does not have the VR or the image stabilization. So you have to be a little bit more cautious if you're using a slower shutter speed. So in most cases you can either use a monopod or of course a tripod if your setting is very, very slow. But here we're handheld. And what's helping keeping things in focus here also is that I had it set to the 28mm, the wide setting, even though at a 30th of a second, and I focused on the first piece of equipment where I think it says Paramount, and that's where the focus was. And you could see I get a reasonably nice depth of field, even at 5.6, using this lens at the 28mm setting. And again, this is with a full frame and great with this type of a camera. And then recently I was asked to attend a farmhouse jam that one of my friends was having. So I decided to keep my guitar at home, and I took along my Tamron 28-75mm lens and my Nikon D7200, which is a crop sensor camera. 1.5 crop center factor actually. So the first image that we're looking at here, again 5.6. I like using this setting if I want to get a reasonably good amount of depth of field, and especially if I'm set to 28mm like I was here. Now of course keep in mind now we're using the crop sensor camera, so it's not exactly at 28. I think it was 44mm or something like that. But overall, you can see that we have a nice sharp image here and also some nice depth of field. And then here I saw the base was leaning against the fence. So I was set actually to 44mm on my lens, and I had it open up all the way to f2.8. And then you can see a little bit of background blur even at 44mm. And I had the ISO set pretty high up here to 1000. At f2.8 and 1/320th of a second, but very, very sharp. Even at 2.8, this lens is capable of producing nice, sharp images as long as it is properly focused. So here we have a close-up of the drummer. I just zoomed in here a little bit. Now we're going to full zoom at 75mm, and I kept it open all the way at f2.8. Then you can see how we have a little bit of background blur. Actually, we have the focus on the drummer, and we have out of focus on the background a little bit. And also, when you get out of focus with your narrow depth of field, keep in mind you're also going to be out of focus on things that are in the foreground. So you want to keep that in mind too. So very important to focus on the exact spot of what you want to have in focus. Now here's an example of shooting a fence at the farm, and here was set wide to 28mm. And then I'm open up here to f4.5. So we have just a little bit more depth of field than we would if we were wide open at f2.8. So 4.5 at 28mm, which is the wide side. So we have a pretty nice depth of field here. And then as I zoom in a little bit closer, we're going to lose some of that depth of field. Actually, I'm zoomed in all the way here to 75mm. I just step back a little bit. Then you can see how the foreground here goes way out of focus. And then I focused probably about 3/4 of the way back or so. So more of the focus is going towards the background more.